Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I am Jeremy. I am a second year grad, technical direction emphasis.
I'm Chase. I'm a first year technical direction grad.
I'm Lauren. I'm a first year technical direction grad.
I'm Allie. I'm a second year SMDM grad.
All right, and starting off this week, we are looking at an article from Vox.com titled "We Need to Talk About How Family Money Can Make or Break an Arts Career" by E.J. Roller. And in this article, he goes on to talk about how his parents give him money to start out or parents giving their kids money to pay for tuition or something in the arts industry, starting off with like $28,000 a year, which is paying for all of your tuition, basically full ride at that point, for a lot of schools in the entertainment and arts. And then it goes on to talk about how it makes it easier because you're not having to work those jobs to pay for it. You're able to focus fully on on your actual learning process and not having to struggle as much because you have that provided for you. And how a lot of students are not going into the arts because they can't afford to go into the arts. And I'm really just curious of what like other people's experiences are, since we all are in school right now, what we're thinking about, what we're struggling with, honestly.
This was actually Rachel from last year, SMPM grad. This was her thesis. And like we talked about this in seminar a lot, where you can only, a majority of the people who are doing the arts have the ability to do the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And like they have the financial backing or they have some sort of financial way to do it. Because if you don't, like, we're not getting rich. Like there's no way to stay afloat just like early on. Like yeah, after you make it a career and stuff. But like if you're trying to study this in school, like there's no way. There's no way to do that. Or you work jobs and you burn yourself out while you're also studying and working for the school on projects. So it's like it is definitely something. And we talked about it in seminar because we were talking about an outreach program where like if you don't know that there's a technical side to theater that you can make into a job, you wouldn't even try, like you wouldn't even do it because you wouldn't think it was a thing that you could do. But even if you knew about it, would you have the ability to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just interesting that it's a privileged thing to be able to do because you have to have the resources.
Yeah, and see, like I come from the side where my parents didn't pay anything for my higher education, getting my undergrad, or my grad degree. I was very fortunate and able to get fight and get scholarships, and then make money during the summers working my butt off at high level summer stocks in order to save money in order to come back to school the next semester. And that's where I'm at right now too. I am now choosing my employment opportunities not necessarily upon the opportunities that I will get, but upon can I afford financially to work there, or can I afford financially to leave this current place that I'm working. So I think it does force, money does force us into different career paths and in our choices that we are doing.
I do think though, because I haven't worked at any particularly high level. I've always been paid pretty poorly for my work, but I saved and lived very in a very tight-fisted way. Yeah, I was incredibly for years and years and years because I was saving up for surgery that I didn't end up having to pay for. So I have a very robust savings account. But it's possible. You just have to have the information available to you about financial planning and have some kind of like long-term goal and long-term planning stuff, which isn't generally a part of arts education.
I think it's particularly if you look at like the undergrad program here, especially like even if you have someone who was like very like skilled and like could do great, like I know some people are able to like kind of pick up like a little bit of part-time work on the weekend, but it's such a rigorous schedule here. Like I know I need to do like loans because like I'm not gonna pick up work, like you really can't. It's too, like you can, but like that demanding of having a part-time job as well as just like the exhaustion you get from having to like do all this work in such an intensive program, like you aren't given that many options. And I at least know for the TD grads, like we're giving like tuition like breaks too, and so it's hard because, well, it's not hard. It takes a lot of planning, and I think you can get there kind of with financial planning and stuff like that, but you have to be in a situation where you're kind of like stable enough to do that, because I think so many situations, like just in America, is kind of this like living paycheck to paycheck, and if you are living paycheck to paycheck, you really can't worry about like savings, or if you get a little bit of savings, inevitably something goes wrong, you know? So yeah, it's definitely, I think arts as a privilege thing overall is an issue with audiences, with the people who are pursuing the arts as careers.
And it's just there's very limited access to a good quality of life in this field.
Well, like what you just started talking about was like audience-wise is if you're trying to work in an industry to give back to the community that is more of a not-for-profit, you're automatically not going to be a very profitable person yourself, because if you're giving so much, you're not getting anything back in that industry or in that setting. So it's hard to actually make money. So you yourself are going to be living at a lower level or lower financial bracket than what someone else who's in the high for-profit theater necessarily. Which I think is kind of flips things on their heads at times. But.
No, I mean, I do agree. Like, I think the financial planning is definitely something that should be part of arts education, because it's not, and right, how are you going to do that unless you know about it? But like, I think you have to come from some sort of level of comfort to be able to do that.
Yeah,
like if
definitely a baseline.
If you start out not at a level of comfort, or even in like a deficit, like it's so hard to, and my immediate family is so supportive. I love my cousin, but like I told him I was going to school for theater, and he laughed at me. He's like, well, you can't get a job that pays well at all. Like, what do you do? Like, like it's not a real job to some people still. And it's like,
It's just a fun hobby. Theater's a hobby. It's not a career.
Yeah, the thing that I was really when I said what I said was thinking about was this particular author's experience, which is I don't know anyone who's had that kind of support.
Right? It's
And
incredible.
she seems to think that she seems to feel like it's impossible for anyone who doesn't have, she said $28,000 a year from her parents, which is just
that's ridiculous.
yeah,
That's,
which is just totally out of touch with reality, and I found this article very frustrating to read.
Yeah, which is why I kind of segued into talking about us, because I think we come from a different, more harshly hit than I think this. This is
More grounded.
More grounded. This is a very, very privileged background she's coming from.
Yeah, but the industry isn't going to change if you're going to offer things like these internships in New York that are the most, like, the best internships you can get, but they're not paid.
For like $100 a week. Yep.
Yeah, or like, $100 a week. So like, if you don't have some sort of family support, like,
you can't do that.
You can't make it work. And like, not to like, it's great when your family has the ability to support you like that and can, but if they don't, then, or even if you have to be one of the supporting financial members of your family, then like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say you can't, because anything's possible, but at least
it's really hard too.
It's really hard in the more intensive programs that are like requiring you to invest all this time. I don't see how it would really be feasible.
Yeah. Years ago, I applied somewhere that told me that they would help me apply for food stamps if I wanted to come to intern.
Wow.
Well, and that brings up a good point too. It's not only outside factors. There's still, I mean, I hope and I feel like generally it's getting better, but it's still a thing like within the industry where isn't it enough that you're doing it for the love of the work?
Love
Like,
that you're doing
that
it for
should
the
be
art
it.
or for the experience. And
That
those
should
are
be
not-
worth it.
not
Like,
valued.
that doesn't pay rent or feed me.
Right? Different levels of theater.
Yeah. So let's segue into who designs and directs in LORT theaters by gender from howlround.com by Porsche McGovern. And basically, it was a breakdown over a series of years. She had done one study of LORT theaters and their designers. This is just like the designers. It doesn't include like assistants or like things like that. And basically, it was coming back as the overall number was around 20.1, I think, the first time she did it, and then she waited a few years and did it again, and it had gone up to 29% of women. And obviously, there was a breakdown of the of the different roles, like lighting, scenic, and in all but costumes, where women were the majority, it seemed that, or it was that women usually around 15 to kind of 20%. In costumes, I think they were around 70. So,
yeah, you find costumes and oddly stage management, the places where there are the most,
Actually, surprisingly, in my interactions with a lot of other theaters, I've actually seen the female TDs getting more and more frequent, faster than, say, female scenic designers. You know, which is odd, especially at this level of theater. But because this tends to be the mass industry. A lot of people are working in that during the summers, especially. And so it seems like there's lots of opportunities for people to be working there. And I don't know if it's the people always hiring people they worked with still syndrome going on. And it's taking those people to retire or leave the industry for opinions and opportunities to open up. But
I'm sure there's some of that. I would be interested in seeing some statistics that go back a little bit farther, just to see, because I just wonder if we're at a weird kind of stagnant point in feminism overall because of kind of the onset of social media and things like that, where everything is everywhere, which means that there's a lot of backlash and there's a lot of things just kind of swirl around. And I don't know, I just wonder why it's so slow, and if there was a point when it was faster, and what
the growth rate.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and what changed between then and what's happened in the past 5 years, which is basically no growth.
Right.
Which sucks.
I agree. I have seen more in the TV realm. I'm trying to think. I think that in theater, the one that I've seen grow the least is probably lighting. I can count the number of female lighting designers that I know on one hand.
I have only in my whole career I've only worked professionally with one female lighting designer. And 2 scenic designers. I've worked with multiple female TDs and multiple stage managers and almost every other facet. But
even
except for sound.
Sound
Sound has been a little bit more evenly split for me in my experience.
Yeah,
But
it's growing a little bit.
I
know more females who are in sound than I do in lighting.
it's interesting that you say the lighting thing, because in my undergrad we learned in my lighting design class about the history of lighting design, and initially
some of the greatest.
it was more female because it was something that the men were like, we do the scenic design, we build
we do the
things.
hard physical
You
things.
take this new technology, and so some of the greatest innovators in lighting design and the ones who really got it started, it was these incredible women. So I think that's really interesting that you found.
And it goes back to the cycle of why is it different now? What has it been before type of thing. Yeah.
Overall, how the industry keeps changing.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely in some things, but quickly in others. It's weird.
And yet stuff still kind of repeats itself, or lapses and then comes back. Yeah. It's interesting.
But speaking of diversity, in sort of a different sense in theater, this is an article on Exant magazine by someone named Scotty with 2 E's, called "Fighting Theater's Anti-Fatness Problem." Scotty is a person who identifies as a working class, femme, uneducated, dyslexic, queer, poly, fatty. And it's a discussion about how fatty is to them part of an identity, and it's an identity that is very much marginalized in society, but especially in theater. And it's kind of an exploration of what it's like in this industry to not have a model figure, like
Like to not see yourself represented.
well, that's yeah, absolutely. But it's also, it talks about actual physical issues in spaces of theaters that were built in the 60s for a different average body type that they don't, some people don't fit into. And it's about, seeing fat people on stage in major roles, and they aren't like the butt of the joke or whatever, and kind of things like that, making it
The humor sidekick.
yeah, and that's because that's what we see a lot of, and it's not,
Or like dialogue addressed at them has to do with their appearance and their physical. Yeah.
I mean, you can see that all the way back into the Guys and Dolls. The sidekick being intended to be heavier set
And
always eating,
Yeah.
always eating on stage, and there's jokes
Yeah.
made about him. Oh, were you not paying attention? Oh, well, I had to go get food because I was hungry.
yeah, it's like comic relief, or they're super depressed and hate themselves, or something along those lines. And
there's no more depth to that role for them.
Right.
It's like a one note, like the fat person on the stage. They're either funny or sad.
So I also hate to say, pitch perfect. In a way.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And this is
Oh
this,
yeah, sorry. It took me. So I was like, Rebel Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this particularly insightful point that there is an idea that fatness means failure, and this writer is hoping to derail that idea and to show that people have different ways of moving through the world.
Yeah.
Right, and like, yeah, how sometimes not like anybody that like you know what I mean, like not like people that like not my family, not people I know type of thing, but like you hear people say stuff like, oh well, they should just exercise more. It's like you don't know their lives, you don't know,
You don't know their struggles. You don't know.
And
yeah,
also, you don't know there's nothing wrong.
there's a right. Also,
nothing wrong.
how do they feel about themselves?
Yeah.
Have you asked them that? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of public judgment, public shaming.
Have a show going on.
Local warm-up.
yeah, sure thing.
We were doing those earlier too.
So anyway, in conclusion, talking about this article, this theater artist is trying to create a space,
Safe space.
a safe space, yeah, to create performance spaces where that fight, as the title says, fighting theater's anti-fatness problem.
Well, I've noticed this I'm a big person. I am tall. I'm also heavy set. And going into old classic theaters, the seats are small. Not just, side to side, but also front to back. So like my knees are always cracking the seat in front of me, possibly, because of how they were originally set. They were built for a completely different body type. So that's automatically going to discourage people who are big from going to the theater if it's not a comfortable experience just being in there. So, other than just seeing themselves on stage, we also have to think about the space in general as as architects and then people who are designing those spaces as well.
And I think it was interesting that he sort of got into the idea that initially he thought that theater would kind of be like a safer, more welcoming space. And maybe like in general, like people, like individuals are, but what is being displayed on stage, as it so typically is a reflection of the society we live in. And I think the problems in the theater and the problems like we're dealing with and like how fat people are perceived in society in general as well it's the same problem, and it'd be nice for theater as the progressive community we like to at least say we are to start actually making actions towards that. And it's the same sort of deal with representations of other kinds
Mhm.
to people with disabilities, minorities, that sort of.
Yeah, I was actually going to say two things on that. Like, so you mentioned how things were originally like had been done and how things had been built too, and like there are places that are not built for disabled stage managers.
Nope.
Like,
Yeah.
there's
You have
no
to climb
way.
up there because you're calling from up there, and it's a straight ladder.
Like, no, that's not. Do better. But yeah, it has to be a commitment and a thought process of, hey, we have people of all sizes, of all abilities, like we have to accommodate all of them. And like you have to actively do that. And I think it also like representation is like all appearances, right? It's dang it, where was I going with this? I had another thing and I completely forgot.
I don't like for me, like I know my theater teacher in high school was like, oh, if you ever want to be a leading lady, you have to be like at least 5'10".
Right.
And like I mean, like she was like 4'11", and she was like, I'll never be a leading lady. But like it's like
I
learned
had
that being the
a
one.
professor in undergrad who kind of said the same thing, and
Yeah.
she quit acting because she was too short.
yeah, and she I mean like she was a successful actor. She did other roles, but she's like the only time I was in a leading role was when my male counterpart was like 6'7", and the director really wanted that dramatic.
Adorable, yeah.
Yeah, the dramatic difference in height.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't think she said it as a discouraging thing for us because she was very supportive, but like, it's just these facts that are ingrained into the industry that we should change because they're boring. Honestly, it's boring, and better choices
To
is
see the
with
same
better
thing again and again and again.
yeah, and we're wasting talent that could be playing these complex, really like juicy like roles on stage, and we're putting them in one-dimensional characters because that's the box we've created and put them in, and it's stupid.
And
That's
I,
great.
right.
Destroy it.
Break it down for
I
recycle.
think the industry is moving towards a much better mindset on keeping track of both our physical health, yes, but also like our mental health and our mental well-being of accepting people for who they are and what they are.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I think there are efforts being made in order to do that now.
I think the commercial world is very much not going that way.
I don't think the commercial world, but I think the starting at the theater world, mostly at the regional and down level, and then it's starting to work its way into the industry.
I mean, I agree with you. That's a lot of qualifiers. The majority of revenue that's going into the theater industry is going into these big shows that are continuing to perpetrate these kind of stereotypes and issues like this, which
I was gonna say, like, right, so theater and film are not that much different, and yet in film, you still have a whole room of people sitting in on an audition, and then when the person walks out, they're like, oh no, she wasn't pretty enough, no, she wasn't tall enough, no, she was too tall, her male counterpart is gonna feel intimidated, no, she can't do that.
Yeah,
Like,
if you ever want a real
it's like-
reality check, just sit on the back end of an audition.
and you're right, for commercial, it seems like it is still much worse. And yet, you have the things like with HBO, where they're bringing in the sensitive content person, like the intimacy director. So like there are strides being made in certain areas, but not all, and it does seem like
Well, also, the next article that we have coming up, which is talking about
how to take care of your mental health and how to do that in theater, less of the commercial setting. So hopefully it'll go up, although never seems to work.
an attempt was made.
So this is on Dance Magazine. It's talking about why every company should have a performance psychologist on staff. And I love it. And it's talking about how the same way that you have physical therapists and physicians and dietitians and everything, especially for dancers, on a team, you should have a performance psychologist who can. Like I said, it's talking about dancers in here, but really any performer. Like they will push through stuff. They will, if they're good, if they're not a diva, and they'll push through stuff and not want to burden anybody with it and all this stuff. But it's like that's not helping anybody, and that's not making you a better performer, and that's just making you a more miserable human. And so if you have someone whose sole job at that company or on that production is to help you through those things, that would be phenomenal. And they have it not in theater, not in the performance setting, but they have it in like businesses. Like my cousin lives in town and
Corporate companies.
she does this for her company. She's like kind of HR, but like not really. She just is there.
He's usually independent from HR
Yeah.
to try not to have issues. But like I was like, if it is an HR issue, we will refer you to.
Right.
But
like she's there to make sure that people are mentally healthy and like emotionally okay, and like if they have a problem they can talk to her, and you know, and it's confidential. Like it's not she's gonna go someplace and tell someone like a boss like, hey, this person's having trouble. Like
being that listening ear outside of the work environment.
Right.
Having that confidence.
While still having the knowledge of the inside of the environment. Yeah. So it's just interesting, and it's the thing that I think should be put into place. I do think maybe the dance world needs it more immediately, so I'm glad that they're doing that. But I think theaters could definitely benefit from this. And I think the dance world needs it more immediately and started it first because there's not really anybody for that yet. Like in theater, you can kind of say like maybe the company manager, sometimes stage management, like depends on like what part of the process. We are there. They talk to us. We just listen.
I'm wrinkling my face because just because it's true doesn't mean it should be.
No, I don't think it should be.
Yeah, and I think another reason why it's finding its way first into the dance industry is that those are places that have for years already had a chiropractor on staff, a physical therapist on staff.
Mm-hmm.
So to add another person to the well-being on staff is not that much of a stretch.
Right.
It's just identifying that, oh yeah, we really do actually need this. And then there's already the budget lines and things to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why we're first seeing it creep up here.
I was thinking about how it might be applicable to smaller companies that can't afford a full-time staffer to do
Well,
that.
that's the problem.
And I was thinking about places that have, the word is escaping me. Performers have, certain allowances to go get body work done.
Mm-hmm.
And why not have allowances for them to go get, mental health
Yeah.
sessions or, that, and then kind of,
Right.
I'm losing my words today. That kind of sphere, different kinds of making you mentally stronger, not just necessarily
Conditioning,
therapy
yeah.
and things like that,
Okay.
but like life coach kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. If you're gonna cover one sort of
Yeah, it would be pretty
Health.
easy just to add
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
tick box that they can have to help them be at their best.
Yeah. So just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
I do think it should be something that people do. Another tactic, if that is not for you, going to see a psychologist. Another tactic, I don't know.
This is a good track. This is a good track.
The segues. So this article is on artsy.net and talks about why you should keep a daily sketchbook and how to get started. More than just picking up pencils and start drawing. So this is, I didn't even say the author of the first one. This is Eli Hill. And it brings up really good points. And it's like, it's a creative outlet in which you can express things maybe not in complete form, just so you can get it out there and try and process it. And there was one quote in here that I really loved. When used on a daily basis, sketchbooks can help us not only transform how we see the world, but how we process it as well. So, I mean, and I love this because I think it goes back to so many things, like music. For me, that's what music does.
Mhm.
I don't have to make it. I just I just have to listen to it and connect with it and have it express something that I cannot express. I have and I feel and I cannot express it. It's perfect. And that's kind of how fairy tales started too. And I know that this is very tangential. I'll bring it back at some point.
Okay.
Um,
I'm assuming you're going with it.
but like that's how fairy tales started too. It was a way it was a very direct teaching method for children. Like they were intended for children. They were harsh, and it was like, do not walk in the woods by yourself. You're gonna get eaten by a wolf. Like, but you can't say that to a child because
It doesn't
it'll
connect.
terrify them, and if you preach at someone, it won't connect. And so it was a way to process things. It was a way to process how sometimes your mom has to be the evil stepmother and tell you things that you hate, and you want to say that you hate her, but you don't really, and that's just a part of her, and the good mother comes back. It's a way to process things. And even as adults, and I think it's very important that as adults we're kind of expected to just be able to process things. That's completely ridiculous.
I think one thing that daily sketchbooks gives you, it gives you the appreciation for what you're experiencing too. Because when I was an undergrad, something we had was a daily sketchbook, and we were required to do like 2 or 3 sketches a day, and we would turn it in for a grade, but it wasn't really a grade. It was just like completion. Did you do it?
Right.
Were you drawing? Were you actually looking at things? Were you trying to see different things in them? And that experience gave me great appreciation just for looking at either nature or just the haphazard nature of which things fall in a room when a bunch of people enter. Is like just understanding, okay, well, you can see so much more in it. There is a story to it just by looking at the cold scene of what it is. And I think everyone should sketch or draw or something.
I had a similar assignment and my professor would be like, you should be drawing every day. And I hated it because I'm garbage at drawing. But like, he was also like, if you don't draw more, then you won't get better, which is right, but I don't want to do it because it's hard. But I think another layer of that was being aware of your surroundings, and as a technical like director or technician, theater technician, whatever, even as a designer or whatever you want to be, just opening your eyes to what's around you and how things work will, even if you don't need it right now, is something he would always say, be like, if you look at something and you think it's cool for some reason, whether it's just like the way it works, or he's like, take it, remember it. You don't need it right now, but in like 5 years down the line, when you're searching for that one answer, you'll be like, I know this thing, and you can use that. And I appreciate the idea of the sketchbook being something that allows you to kind of process that and almost like remember it in some more meaningful way than like, that's cool, I'll remember that, because how often do you really remember those things? And I think there's a definite value in being able to look at something and kind of see that beauty and that function or that design that was put into it and store it somewhere.
I agree, but I also think that there are other ways to sketch besides drawing. You can sketch with words, you can sketch with images, you can sketch by taking a picture and then like draw an arrow to the thing that you were thinking about.
Well, like along that line, there was another thing that we did in my undergrad, which was a TD journal, and every week we just submitted like what our thoughts or experiences of certain moments or something that we found interesting throughout the week, and just that moment to reflect and get in the habit of reflecting upon what you've experienced in the same way as you would with a drawing, is reflecting upon what you've seen, reflecting upon what you've experienced, then internalizes and lets you process it and then retain it so much better. And then you grow from that too.
Yeah, and it's good for mindfulness too. So if you are sitting there and really observing a thing and really thinking about it, and you're really becoming present in the space and in your body and in your environment as you're in the process of observing whatever you're looking at, it can be really restorative.
Yes. And I agree that. Oh, sorry.
That was the major thing too that my professor would say. He was like, he's like, I don't care how like good your sketches are, but it still frustrated me to no end that I was
You wanted it to be perfect.
But he wanted you to like really look at things, because in your head, if you like assume you know how things look and how they are, but if you have to like sketch it on a page, and particularly when you're not good at it, you really like are trying to look and trying to see how you can form those lines and get that form factor, and you have to really observe something in order to try and sketch it.
I agree. I think it teaches, if nothing else, like a really good process of like, how do you get from blank piece of paper to finished product, and like trying to get there, even if it's not done well. Like you have an appreciation, you have like planned out, you have to do step by step, you have to figure out how you're going to draw, and like You can do it in pencil or pen. You know, like it's just interesting. But I do agree. And so they gave 5 steps to how to get started, and like how to treat it. But I agree. I think I agree with more of the idea behind it, like you were saying, where it's like, what is it trying to do for you? And then there are other things that can still do that thing. So it was like, use tools that you love. So like that sketchbook that you're, always gonna love to pick up, and if it's, sketching is something that you like, that's a thing, and makes you comforted every time you do it. Make mistakes like without fear. Like you can, it doesn't matter how good or bad it is, just do it. Do the process. Use your observation and imagination. So like you try and drawing what you're seeing, but like what is the essence of what you're trying to do? Use a sketchbook, not a camera. I disagree with that. I think cameras can be just as powerful in how you frame it, but I also
It's a different
went
form
to
of art.
undergrad for DP, so
Different form of art.
and then it's use it as like your trusted companion. So just really using it for the process of how to interpret things and see different perspectives, and yeah, it's interesting. So
Speaking of staying in tune with one's reality, this article is The Simple Joy of No Phones Allowed by Rap2.com and written by David Kane. And this is talking about how concerts and other venues are starting to ban phones from being a part of the experience by not allowing people to have them in the space. And I think this is really great because it's something I've always been, being in theater, been annoyed by, is seeing the cell phone out, and then you're seeing, you're watching the live performance that is 10 feet in front of you from the phone that is like 3 feet in front of you, capturing it right now, and you're putting a lens between you and what is reality. And yes, you're capturing it for later experience, but you're also, I think you're tainting the experience for yourself and those that are around you, trying to be in the moment and experience what it is. So much are we trying to produce that in the moment reaction, that moment feel, that environment, that inducing something like technology can, in that way can ruin the performance. I think there are performances in which it works, and that there are participation moments and things that it can work in, but I am overall in favor of the no phones allowed.
It's just funny because last week we were just talking about integrating technology
Right.
into reality experiences, and then we have on the other end, take all the technology out. Everything's better
Well,
that way.
not taking the whole technology out, I think it's taking it out of the audience's hand. Yeah.
but like I understand it, and I do agree to a certain extent. But like I'll do that at concerts. Like if there was a Paul McCartney concert I went to and my mom couldn't be there, I took a video for her.
Mhm.
Now I was taking the video here as I was just watching it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, it's still filming generally the stage. But like,
Exactly. You're not looking through it to
No.
see. Yeah.
No, and I don't hold it up so that it's blocking anybody else's point of view, hopefully, or like I'll hold it like here, so it's
It's also
like in
Paul
front of my
McCartney
body.
concert, not some of the other concerts out there.
But like, I do think it's interesting. Like my sister will say to me all the time, like I'll take pictures in like museums or something, and she's like, where she really got on me. She's like, "Are you gonna remember the way that the light fell on the statue, though? You're gonna remember the sound of the child behind you?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, no, I'm not. You're right. It can't capture the whole experience, like, because it can't."
I am on board for the whole no technology thing, because I thought that article put it in a really great way that I hadn't thought of before, of just like the black void hole you become when you're on your phone in a
Sucks you into it.
interactive environment, because it sucks you in, takes you out. But even they use the example of when you're at like a dinner. I never have it out at dinner, and like that kind of drives me crazy, especially if you're out at a restaurant celebrating and people are like,
No.
and
Especially
I'm
with
like,
people that are like,
You're talking to me.
yeah, but like even if like everyone else and it's just one person, like you can feel that like
The
void
sucking.
of just sucking in and not being there. And I think that is just magnified in the concert setting,
Yeah.
and it's something I'd never thought of that way before, and especially for performers who are up there, and then to look out on an audience and see people with just like the light on
looking
their
here,
faces.
not at them.
Yeah, or even down here, like they're not experiencing the concert in the ways that it was intended to be experienced.
Yeah.
And I do think it's kind of this like obsession with technology that like has become such a major part of our lives. And I think there are great reasons to use it sometimes, and the tools it provides us with like so instantaneously, it's amazing, it's incredible, but the amount of time we put into it just on things like social media, I think does detract from our lives, and taking it from the perspective of what the author did with the, well, I grew up in a time where there was a smoking section on airplanes, and that
Yep.
seems crazy now, but I wonder if the new thing, because this is like,
Free zones.
yeah, and just like, because it is taking away from health in way, I mean, like, it's different than the whole like smoking thing, but in some ways it's not that
Yeah.
different.
Like, also maybe not. We might all be getting cancer from our phones, so who knows?
Yeah,
It's fine.
like the long-term effects study that he was like, I can't wait till we see how bad it is for us to just be constantly glued to
Well, I
it.
also know, like, CMU itself is reevaluating its smoking zones and smoking policies right now. And, maybe we need to also look at technology zones, like
Let's see.
technology-free zones. I'm just saying, though, like, if you're trying to study and stuff like that, having those quiet spaces, those technology-free spaces might be nice.
I mean, there are like quiet spaces where you
Mhm.
can't be like on the phone.
Yeah.
I'm
But it doesn't
sorry,
stop people.
It just makes me think of the quiet study. It's the loudest place I've ever been.
That's fair.
Okay, yeah, so.
Oh wait,
Yeah, you're right.
I
My
had
bad.
a really good segue too.
Segue.
It was
Just do
about.
it.
Okay, I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. It was about how experiencing things otherly than how they were originally meant to be experienced. That's a word. No, it's true. Okay, so reevaluating the romantic hit songs of pop music's patriarchy. I hate you both. QED.org. By Emma Silvers. This article, the writer went to an event in California where it was the what's the actual name of the event? Oh, just romantic songs.
Mhm.
Okay, there we go.
Not memorable. Huh? That'd be why.
A little long of a
Not catchy.
And it was a 3-day performance, 19 hours total, where the performers were dressed in all black, and they were positioned throughout the building. Some of them were like in like meeting spaces, some of them were in closets, some of them were in staircases, some of them were in bathrooms, and they were in all black, and they had one song each, and they sang and performed and played their song straight. So like they went to the bathroom and they got tea, and that was it. But otherwise they were singing this song, and they are all songs that are from they're considered classic hits, and are really quite troubling. And
Yes.
I've thought of this a surprising amount throughout my life. Because I love the Beatles, I really do. But like some of their songs,
Just weird.
"Run for Your Life" it makes my skin crawl every single time I hear it, and I
So-
skip it.
You should probably say what specifically they're weird. Why specifically they're weird.
Because they're talking about sexual harassment and rape and like yeah.
Subject
So,
matter.
You're talking around
Subject
a little
matter.
bit. And
Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. So in the canon of what they performed were songs like "Run for Your Life" and Robin Thicke's "Blurred Lines" and the Crystals' "He Hit Me and It Felt Like a Kiss." And this was also, and like Rolling Stones and like Lil Wayne, like it. And this was also on the weekend where Kavanaugh hearings were taking place. And so it was really just like reading this article made me hurt. But I'm really glad that they did that. I'm really glad that it was a performance that they did, even if, like, one of the artists said, she was singing one of the songs, and one of the groups that came through was a group of children, a group of young girls, and she was singing.
Believe me.
Oh no, it's on page 5 of 5, and I have page 4 of 5. I'll pick the rest of it. She was singing a song that is specifically about, like, talking about girls who grow up, and like it's like a coming of age thing, but it's in a really misogynistic lens, through a misogynistic lens. And she said the group of girls came into the room, and her heart just like broke because they're not even aware of it yet. Like, they don't even know the world that they're gonna walk into, and like all of the things that they're gonna have to consider about like which streets to walk down at night, and like how many people to take with you when you're going to a bar, and like it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
I think it's definitely something that I've thought a lot about too. And I know I don't remember the name, but it's this person who like does talks about feminism, and she calls herself a bad feminist because like she still loves rap music that's super derogatory towards women. And there's this concept of we kind of let this art and these artists slide by with these questionable topics and questionable things that they've done.
Even people who have clearly and explicitly done harm
Yeah.
to a woman, they are still making music. They are still making a lot of money.
Yeah, and we look past that because, you know, oh, it's so catchy, or, you know,
And it's very like it's just a pop hit. It's,
yeah,
you know.
It's brushed off so easily,
yeah,
so
and
casually.
you can say you're like, oh, well, it's pop music. That doesn't mean anything, but
I don't
it's
think about it.
reflecting and reinforcing these sort of ideas in ways that we're not even like cognitively thinking about, which is sad and is kind of what I think a lot of feminism is trying to fight now, which I know people, women even, who are kind of upset with like the new wave like of like feminism, because they're like, look at all these things like we have, and we're like pushing for things that like other people don't even have, and they have validity in their ideas and philosophies, but I think you have to appreciate and understand the fact that this is something that's so ingrained into our culture.
Yeah.
It's hard to even realize it. Like, I've been trying to train myself out of saying guys as like a just term to refer to a group. And it's been really hard. Like, usually I say it and then I immediately catch myself and goes,
Yeah.
or I'm like mid saying it, and then I tell like any crew I work with, I'm like, listen, I'm trying to break myself of this, so yell at me if I say it offhandedly. But it's just ingrained into things.
It's very ingrained, and it's it like it is so subversive, and it's troubling. But we were talking about this from like colloquium last year. It's like, how do you separate, right? Because it's not like I'm gonna condemn all of what the Beatles and John Lennon did because of one or even a couple of songs that they did. Were like, you know, I love Paul McCartney, but it's getting better.
Nope.
The song. I used to be mean, I beat my woman, and like, oh my god, and I'm like, but do you discount Hey Jude and Wings and the White Album and like it, and it's I think it's very troubling. And I think it's a battle.
I don't think there's any clear answers because you can't be like, I'm gonna cut myself off of like any like kind of art form with artists who have like done bad things because then you have no art left. But it's
no one is
yeah.
perfect.
No one's perfect, but then you have to kind of find that line of like, what are we going to accept and what can we do to kind of enhance society's own ideas of what they're willing to tolerate and continue to push forth as popular culture as something that's acceptable. So.
Yeah, and it's hard just out on the fringes of social activism. There are a lot of people who are like, if you interact with any of these things, you're a bad person. And it's kind of hard to engage with that kind of extreme attitude towards these issues. I think it is a gray area. It is hard to decide. You can't just throw everything out. It's history. It happened. It's continuing to happen. We can try to keep it from happening. But
Right.
I think it's acknowledging the issues that are at place too, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, the Beatles are great, but like if you understand like kind of some of their content and some of like the huge flaws in like just what they were doing and what they were like contributing, then I think at least the awareness is there.
Right.
Speaking of, I don't know, pop music.
Yeah.
I
Moving on.
started on mine because it was a nice segue, and I was like, oh, mine
It's all
must
good.
be next. But the name of the article is "Can Music Artists Stop Stealing from Choreographers Already?" from dancemagazine.com. It says it's by Lauren Wingsroth, but I won't confirm that because the article that printed underneath it isn't the right one. So it's about misaligning the spine. So we won't talk about that. But I know what the article is about, and
Yeah.
it's basically the most recent was Kelsey Ballerini, who is a country artist. Her choreography for the Country Music Awards was taken from a group who I can't remember the name of, or I would have referenced it. And this has also happened with like Beyonce and her choreography. And so it's the idea is that I don't know if you can like I guess it's who originated the choreography. I don't know if it's fair to blame the artist if choreographers are just coming to them and being like, here's my thing, and if they don't, it's basically the article said it looks like these choreographers are like Googling like YouTube videos and finding things they like and then being like, oh, well, this is really lesser known. So.
Oh, but the one that was being referenced is not lesser known. It is iconic.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hugely famous, and any choreographer who did that knows what it is and knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's not okay.
Yeah. So.
But I can't remember. I'm kicking myself for not remembering the artist either. But they're being apparently remarkably cool about it.
Yeah, they're
What are you
using it
gonna do?
as publicity. They're like, come see the real thing. It's better.
It is.
That's a very classy way to deal with it, but it's still not justified.
Right, no.
And
Yeah, it's from the -16.
Like, how do you police that sort of thing?
Right, and you would expect that your choreographer is the one who is being mindful in
And
like a
honest in their work.
good way. Right. Because like, I would say that you would have like someone on staff who would like double check that. You know what I mean?
It's so hard to double check too.
yeah, how do you
Right.
double
like,
check?
not necessarily in this
choreography?
instance, but in other instances too.
Yeah,
Right.
because you can't be like, oh, do like a like. I mean, you can, but you can't be like dancing like with chair and then a bunch of dance moves. I don't know what they're called, but like.
Well, I mean, there's got to be a way of like referencing images, right? Like if you have an image, you can see if there's any.
I mean, there are all kinds of Google algorithms.
Right.
Like, look at YouTube, which will shut anything down that like vaguely looks like something else.
Yeah.
So you could do that, but it's
I just
just
think-
like you don't have the money to employ that person on a production.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening is that the people with the money, these artists, multi-million-dollar shows, whatever, they're just like, oh, well, if we sue us it will be a drop in the bucket. So let's just do it anyway. We'll make a lot of
I
money
also
for
think
it.
necessarily some of the artists that are performing it may not know.
Oh no, I don't think it's the artist. But the
And no, I'm
choreographer
just saying,
sure did.
and it becomes in a slippery slope when you're taking someone's word for it that's teaching you the choreography that you brought into. You're just taking it at face value at that point.
Yeah.
So you're trusting what they're coming up with is true, and it isn't often questioned until it's produced and it's out there, and then it's backlash from that point
Yeah,
back.
but in this particular case, I remember who's the artist.
Kelsey Ballin.
Mm.
Or what?
Yeah, the performer who's in
Yeah.
trouble, who isn't in trouble and isn't acknowledging, even after it's become very publicly shown and people have like tweeted at her or whatever.
Yeah, it's Kelsey Ballin.
Yeah, she hasn't acknowledged it at all.
Yeah.
Which says not such a great thing to me.
I think it's hard from the artist's perspective of kind of like figuring. I mean, I don't think she's handling it appropriately, but also it's, if it was just a choreographer's thing, no one remembers the choreographer's name who does it. Like, let's talk about the Beyonce. No one's going, oh, Beyonce's choreographer, blah blah blah. They're going Beyonce's choreographer, and no one really, like, I mean, people more in the industry probably have a better idea of that, but just from a like audience, like fan perspective, they don't hear the choreographer because that's not as much in the popular. It's associated now with this artist who may or may not have known about like the issues.
And the choreographer that choreographed it for Kelsey is Nick Flores and R.J. Durrell.
Which tells me that, like, especially after this, as an artist, wouldn't you want to make sure that your choreography was original? Because it is your name attached to it.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
We
mean?
keep kind of seeing things like this. Like there was the last week, the thing with the glass boxes. I don't know, recently, and it's kind of this repeating thing of people want to own their work.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes they're taking work that looks like something else or is, you know, the same thing or whatever. Anyway, trigger warnings at the theater. Should this be a thing? On Clyde Fitch Report. I have no idea what that is. By Alan Harrison. And it's about this author went to go see a show called Fade at Seattle Public Theater. It's a one-act drama by Tanya Saracho, examining dissimilarities in racial and ethnic identities between two Americans of differing Mexican heritage. And there was a trigger warning at the door of the theater. And this author decided to look into, you know, trigger warnings and where they should be, why people use them, if they should be used, and basically concluded they shouldn't be used because there's scholarship that shows that trigger warnings can cause anxiety because people are just waiting for the
Builds
trigger.
anticipation of it.
However, I don't know if I'm, you know, tipping my hand here, but I'm taking all this with a very large grain of salt because it's most of the research that's quoted seems very specific about academic contexts, and it doesn't really apply to theater. My thought about this is that trigger warnings are an accessibility tool. They're an adaptive tool for people with PTSD so that they can go see these shows. That's what it's not about. This guy who doesn't have any kind of issues.
And
It's not about him.
Yeah.
And he's upset because there's a trigger warning, but it's not there for him. It's not there to help him.
This article made me so mad
Yeah,
because
it did.
he at the end was like, yeah, for things like gunshots or strobe lights, and I'm like, he was basically just devaluing mental health as like
He's dismissing PTSD.
yeah,
Totally.
yes,
Or literally, like, we were talking about the performance where people danced on audience members without consent. Like, we were talking about the Halloween stuff where, like, extreme scare. It's like, right, it's not a problem, or it's not something that even is thought of for people who don't, like, that it's not geared towards. That, like, are not affected by it.
Does it really bother you that much to see a trigger warning?
I'm sorry that you were anxious, that you were waiting for this to happen. Like, really? That might have saved someone from, you know, a complete breakdown and not being able to experience the art
And
because they didn't know it was going to
Setting
happen.
back their mental health.
Right, come on. So, yeah, that's ridiculous.
Highly disagree.
Well, I mean, he wasn't anxious. He just thought it was pointless.
Which makes me all even like,
All right, that's even worse.
Yeah.
oh,
All right, whatever.
dismiss that
Jerk.
article.
Okay. Last article from circfascination.com. The title is Acrobats Uncomfortable with Upcoming Saudi Performance by Richowski, we'll say. And basically, it was talking about after the killing of a journalist in Saudi Arabia, that Cirque had decided to still go ahead with their performance there, and it had a couple people from the company talking about how they think that it's just because Cirque is run so much like a business that they just want to make
It just
money
becomes very corporate.
and they don't care. And then Cirque's stance on it was that they are not trying to be political with the countries that they perform in, and to like not perform in any country would be taking a political stance, and that's not something that like they want to.
Isn't
Wants to do with taking a political stance and being more concerned with your performers as human beings.
there's also, isn't there something in there about the 4 pillars of Cirque or whatever, and one of them is being a positive presence in the community? Or yeah, hold on. One of the Cirque's 4 pillars, according to the website, is to act as a responsible agent of change in the community. That's not apolitical.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's false.
Yeah, and you know, it follows up by saying the Cirque employee said that we're no longer an agent of change, saying that they're not fighting for changing anything.
Yes.
Then I then ask, okay, what is the point of your art? Is your point of the art just to make things look pretty?
Spectacle.
To make a lot of money.
Because then I lose a lot of respect for you real quick.
Yeah. Art with a purpose.
With
is
that-
much more
With that loud of a voice.
Well, it makes
with,
it-
you know,
Art to have a purpose. It makes it spectacle when you're just like, look at all these.
when you have that large of a
Fancy.
voice in the international community,
Yeah.
and you choose to say,
Right. It's not like no one's gonna notice that you're.
yeah,
You know, like people are gonna see that you're just choosing to not take a stand and
Yeah,
just
it's like-
pushing for it anyway.
It's a huge economic thing. Like international corporations will decide not to do business in certain countries if they're having political issues.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's very saddening. Sorry for ending this week on a
passionate
sad
note.
There's really nothing else to
It's
like.
all good.
ranting and raging.
But thank you for tuning in. Look forward to hearing from us next week. Have a great week.